Nobody in the room was breathing. That was the thing Chitty noticed first. Not the chandeliers. Not the 200 guests in evening wear. Not the sound of the string quartet cutting off mid-note like someone had yanked the cord from the wall. She noticed that the entire rooftop of the Kong Tower had stopped breathing, every single person, simultaneously, because the man who had just walked through the glass doors with his hand at the small of her back had that effect on rooms. He always had that effect on rooms. But tonight was different. Tonight, Kong Jae-won was not looking at the room. He was looking at her. And the expression on his face, the one she had spent 14 days telling herself was performance, was arrangement, was a very expensive act they had agreed on for very specific reasons. That expression was not performing anything anymore. It was the most honest thing she had ever seen on a human face, and it was directed entirely at her, and her boyfriend was standing 12 feet away watching it happen. Chitty, Jae-won said. Quietly. Just her name. Just that. And she understood, in the specific way you understand something when your body knows it 3 seconds before your mind does, that the plan had gone very wrong. Or very right. She wasn't sure yet which one would destroy her more. Welcome to Afro Soul Connect. On today's episode, you'd get a dose of culture clash, forbidden love, family pressure, second chances, and an unforgettable reunion. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification icon so you never miss a new story when it drops. And don't forget to send this story to a friend or family member you think would love it. Also, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now, let's dive back into this amazing story. To understand what happened on that rooftop, you have to understand who Chitty Obesai was before Seoul. She was the third generation of women who had built Obesai Beauty from a single kitchen recipe her grandmother developed in Enugu in 1971, a shea and rosewood face oil that smelled like something a goddess would wear to sleep. Her grandmother sold it in small glass jars at the local market. Her mother refined the formula, added 3 products, and got it into Lagos boutiques. Chitty took it global. 28 years old, a chemistry degree from King's College London, an MBA she completed while simultaneously managing the brand's UK launch, and the specific kind of beauty that made people assume she had gotten where she was through something other than relentless, intelligent work. She had not. She had gotten there the way her grandmother got there, and the way her mother got there, by being the most prepared person in every room and by refusing, absolutely and without apology, to let anyone make her feel like she was too much. Emeka had never made her feel like she was too much. He had made her feel like she was too little, too ambitious, too focused, too relentless about the things that mattered to her. He had been her boyfriend for 2 years, and he was handsome and charming and occasionally very sweet, and he had a gift for making her feel, in the smallest possible ways, that the things she cared about most were slightly ridiculous. "I just think you should be realistic," he would say. Never loudly. Never with cruelty. Just with the specific patient reasonableness of a man who believed he was helping. The Korean beauty market is one of the most competitive in the world. Obesai Beauty is incredible, but you're going up against brands with 40-year histories and government backing. I just want you to manage your expectations. She had smiled and said thank you and gone back to her projections at 2 a.m. because that was what she did. The breaking point did not arrive in stages. It arrived on a Thursday evening at Dal, Seoul's most celebrated Korean fusion restaurant. 12 guests, including 4 of the investors she had been courting for months, the people who controlled the distribution channels she needed to make the Korean launch work. She had spent 3 weeks preparing for this dinner. The menu, the seating, the pitch presentation she was planning to work into the conversation naturally, the specific bottles of wine she knew the senior investor preferred. She had prepared for everything. She had not prepared for Emeka. He had been drinking since the pre-dinner drinks. Not obviously. Emeka was never obvious about anything, but enough. Enough that when the conversation turned to her timeline for launch, and she laid out her 18-month strategy with the confidence of someone who had run the numbers 14 ways and believed in every one of them, he smiled. He smiled at the table of investors and said, "She's always been like this. Once Chitty gets an idea in her head, there's no stopping her. We just let her run with it and see what happens." The table laughed politely. Chitty did not. She excused herself to the bathroom and stood at the sink for 3 minutes staring at her own reflection with her hands pressed flat against the cold marble and made a decision. She was not going to leave Emeka. Not yet. Not at this dinner in front of these investors in this city, where she was trying to build something. She was going to finish the evening. She was going to close the dinner gracefully and thank everyone and take Emeka back to the apartment and have a conversation she had been avoiding for 6 months. But she was also going to make him understand. Not through conversation. She had tried conversation. She had tried explaining, calmly and clearly, what his particular brand of support actually felt like on the receiving end, and he had listened with the specific attentiveness of a man who believed he was being unfairly criticized for caring about her. She needed something else. She needed something that would make Emeka, specifically, understand in a language he could not argue his way around, in the language of status and power and the specific respect that men like Emeka reserved for people they were afraid of. She needed someone's soul itself was afraid of. She found the contact 3 days later, through a chain of connections so unlikely she would spend weeks afterward trying to reconstruct how it happened. A business associate who knew a fixer, who knew someone in the Kong organization's legitimate hospitality arm, which owned 6 of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants and apparently also managed what Chitty's contact described, with the particular delicacy of someone choosing words carefully, as private personal representation services for high-net-worth clients requiring a specific kind of social presence. "It's not what you think," her contact had said quickly. "What do I think?"
Chitty asked.
"Whatever you're thinking, it's more professional than that. They provide presence. For events. For situations where a person needs to communicate a certain kind of context without explaining it verbally." "You're describing a fake boyfriend service run by the Korean Mafia," Chitty said. Her contact was quiet for a moment. "I would describe it as a discretionary social management service run by a very powerful organization."
"But yes."
Chitty looked at her reflection in the apartment window, the Seoul skyline glittering behind her face, the investor she had spent 3 weeks courting still not having returned her calls since the dinner. "Set up the meeting," she said. The meeting was at a restaurant she had not been to before, not one of the Kong Hospitality Arm's public establishments, but a private room behind a door that looked like a section of wall until someone opened it from the other side. The kind of room designed to communicate that the person who occupied it did not need to be found unless they chose to be. Chitty wore a fitted charcoal blazer over a deep burgundy wrap dress and her natural hair in a high bun because she had learned years ago that the specific combination of formal and vivid communicated a kind of authority that pure corporate dressing never achieved. She looked like someone with her own aesthetic, her own rules. She sat down at the table and waited. Kong Jae-won arrived 11 minutes after the scheduled time, which she would later learn was precisely calculated rather than careless. He was always exactly late enough to communicate that his time was his own, never late enough to be rude to someone he considered worth his time at all. He was taller than she expected, broader. There was a stillness about him that was different from calm. Calm was the absence of turbulence. This was something else, the specific quality of a man who had decided long ago that he would never be the most visibly agitated person in any room regardless of what was happening in it. Short dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that moved across a person once and then landed and stayed, which was more unsettling than the alternative because it meant that by the time those eyes reached yours he had already seen everything else. He sat down across from her without extending a hand. Not rudely, just without the performance of warmth. "Ms. Obesai," he said. His English was precise and lightly accented, and he spoke it the way he did everything, without indicating whether he found it interesting. "Mr. Kong," she said, matching his register exactly. He studied her for a moment. "I was told you needed a particular kind of assistance." "I need 2 weeks," she said. 6 public appearances. Business events, 1 formal dinner, 1 gallery opening. I need someone whose presence communicates a specific message to a specific person. I need it handled professionally, and I need complete discretion." "Who is the specific person?" he said. "My boyfriend," she said. Something moved across his face. Not amusement, exactly. The ghost of something that lived in the same neighborhood. "Your boyfriend," he said. "He has a habit of underestimating me," she said. "I intend to correct that. Publicly. In a way he cannot argue with." Jae-won looked at her for a moment. And you believe my presence will accomplish this? I believe your presence accomplishes things in most rooms, she said. I've done my research. What kind of research? He said. The kind that tells me you own a third of the private dining establishments in this district, that 3 sitting politicians will not make a public appearance in Seoul without your organization's awareness, that your name has not appeared in a Korean newspaper in 11 years despite the fact that you are arguably one of the most powerful private individuals in the city. She held his gaze steadily. That kind of research. The ghost of amusement on his face became something slightly more visible. You're Nigerian, he said. Proudly, she said. In Seoul for
business, she said.
My family's luxury skincare brand. Korean expansion. I have a 5-year strategy, I have the product, I have 3 investors almost committed, and I have a boyfriend who keeps making me look like a woman playing house instead of a woman building something. I need 4 weeks of the former perception corrected. She slid a folder across the table. He looked at it without touching it. Inside is a proposed schedule, the specific events, the compensation structure, and a non-disclosure agreement prepared by my legal team, she said. I'd appreciate you reviewing it tonight if possible. I'm on a timeline. He picked up the folder, opened it. His eyes moved across the first page with the speed of someone who processed written information faster than most people spoke it. He turned 3 pages.
Read.
Turned 1 more. Then he closed the folder and looked at her. The compensation is more than fair, he said. I have one condition. Tell me, she said. If at any point during the arrangement I determine that continuing it places either party in a position I find professionally problematic, he said, I reserve the right to terminate it with 48 hours' notice. Agreed, she said. I have the same right. He extended his hand. She shook it. His hand was warm. She noted it and filed it away in the part of herself she was planning to keep very carefully managed for the next 2 weeks and then never revisit. When do we begin? He said. Tomorrow evening, she said. Emika's company dinner. He'll be there. I need you there first. She stood and picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Ms. Obesai, he said behind her. She turned. Your research, he said. It was accurate, but incomplete. What did I miss? She asked. He looked at her steadily from across the private room, the kind of man who had never once in 37 years been uncertain about the ground beneath his feet. You missed, he said, that I have never agreed to this kind of arrangement before. She processed that for 1 second. Why now? She asked. He held her gaze for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Because you're the first person who sat across from me and conducted this conversation like my name didn't frighten them, he said. I found it interesting. She turned back to the door. She did not let him see that her hand, when it reached for the door handle, was not entirely steady. The company dinner was at a private members' club in Gangnam. Chitty arrived first. She always arrived first. It was a habit she had developed early in her career, the understanding that the person who enters a room last controls the room's attention, but the person who arrives first controls the room's atmosphere. By the time other people walked in, she already knew the layout, had identified the sight lines, had spoken to the staff, and established a warmth that made the room lean toward her without knowing why. She was wearing a deep emerald-fitted dress that stopped just above the knee, her natural hair down tonight in loose defined curls that fell to her shoulders, gold earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, and a composure so complete that the maitre d' showed her to the best table in the room without her asking. Emiko arrived 20 minutes later with 3 of his Lagos business associates who were visiting Seoul for the week. He found her at the table and kissed her cheek with the particular warmth of a man who was in a good mood and had not yet noticed anything unusual. You look beautiful, he said. Thank you, she said. She did not tell him what was coming. She had been deliberately not telling him what was coming for 24 hours, and the anticipation had done something interesting to her. Not nervousness, but a specific kind of electric certainty, the feeling of a woman who has set something in motion and is watching it approach. Kang Jae-won walked through the door at exactly 8:17. The room did the thing rooms did when he entered them, not dramatically, not with any single visible response, but with the specific atmospheric shift of a space registering the arrival of someone significant without being able to explain why. Conversations didn't stop. They just became slightly less important to the people having them. He was wearing a black suit. No tie. His dark hair was the same as the night before, short, combed back without styling product, the specific informality of a man who knew his face required no assistance. He moved through the room the way he had spoken the night before, without performance, without announcement, as though any room he entered had been expecting him. He found her table in 4 seconds. She watched him cross the room toward her and felt, in a place she had not cleared for this feeling, something shift. He sat down beside her. Not across from her. Beside her. Close enough that the specific warmth of him was immediately present, and he picked up her hand from the table with the ease of a man who had been doing this for years, turned it over, and pressed his mouth briefly to the inside of her wrist. It was not in the brief she had given him. She controlled her face with every resource available to her. "You look extraordinary," he said. Quietly. For her only. "You're early," she said. Equally quietly. "You said 8:15, he said. "I said 8:30. "I misread it," he said. And the ghost of amusement was back, the one that lived just below the surface of his composure, and she understood that he had not misread anything. Across the table, one of Emika's associates had gone very still. Emika himself had turned from the conversation he was in with the specific quality of a man who has registered something peripheral and is turning to assess it properly. He looked at Jae-won. Jae-won looked back at him with an expression that communicated absolutely nothing except that he was aware of being looked at and found it neither interesting nor threatening, which was somehow the most unsettling response available. "Emika," Chitty said pleasantly. "This is Jae-won. He's been helping me navigate some of the distribution conversations this week."
It was not a lie.
She had been careful about what was and wasn't a lie. "Jae-won," Emika said. The tone was the careful neutral of a man gathering information before committing to a response. "Good to meet you." "Likewise," Jae-won said. One word. Flat. Not hostile. Simply the response of a man for whom this introduction required no more investment than that. Emika looked between them once more. Then he turned back to his associates. Chitty reached for her water glass. Under the table, Jae-won's hand found hers. Not dramatically. Not with any visible motion. Just his hand over hers, warm and certain, in a way that was invisible to everyone at the table and entirely visible to every nerve ending in her body. "Breathe," he said. So quietly she almost didn't hear it. "I am breathing," she said. "You stopped for approximately 4 seconds when I sat down," he said. "I did not," she said. "You did," he said. "Don't worry. I won't tell anyone." She looked at him sideways. He was looking at the menu. The dinner lasted 3 hours. By the end of the first hour, Emika had repositioned himself twice to have a better sightline to Chitty and Jae-won. By the end of the second hour, his conversation with his associates had become visibly less engaged, his attention moving to the other end of the table at intervals that were becoming less subtle. By the third hour, he was watching with the specific quality of a man who had walked into a room believing he understood its landscape and was discovering he had misread the map. What Chitty had not anticipated was that the performance, if it still was a performance, would feel this natural. Jae-won was not a man who performed warmth. He did not have warmth on his surface in the way that some men did. The easy charm, the ready laugh, the open body language of someone who wanted to be liked. But there was something else. A specific quality of attention that he turned on her when she spoke that made her feel like the most interesting problem in the room, not because he was flattering her but because she genuinely had the impression he was paying attention and finding what he paid attention to worth his time. "Tell me about the rosewood," he said between the main course and dessert. She looked at him. "What?" "The rosewood oil," he said. "In the original formula. Your grandmother's recipe. What made her choose it?" She stared at him. "How do you know about the rosewood?" "I did research," he said simply. "What kind of research?" she said, using his words from the night before back at him. Something moved across his face. "The kind that tells me Obesai Beauty's original formulation is built on a rosewood and shea base that has been documented in ethnobotanical literature as having measurable skin regeneration properties since the 1950s. That your grandmother was not a chemist, but functioned as one through observation and iteration over 30 years. That your mother added retinol derivatives in 1998 before the Korean beauty market made that an industry standard. That your expansion here is not a gamble. It is a strategic inevitability that the right investor will recognize immediately. He looked at her steadily. That kind of research. Chitty set down her fork. You researched my brand, she said. I researched you, he said. I prefer to understand what I am involved in. We signed the agreement last night, she said. I know, he said. I researched you before I decided whether to sign it. She looked at him for a long moment. And I signed it, he said, as though that answered everything, which she supposed it did. Across the table, Emeka was watching this exchange with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not quite recognition, not quite alarm, something in between, the expression of a man who is beginning to revise an assumption he has been operating on for 2 years. Good, Chitty thought. But underneath the good, something else was happening that she had not budgeted for, which was that the warmth she felt when Jae-won spoke about her grandmother's formula was not the warmth of a woman executing a plan successfully. It was the warmth of a woman being seen by someone who had specifically and deliberately chosen to look. She had not expected that. She was not sure what to do with it. The event that broke things open came not at the dinner but 3 days later, at a rooftop gallery opening in Itaewon. A Korean-African contemporary art exhibition, an event Chitty had already been invited to for professional reasons before the arrangement began, which made it perfect for the second appearance. She arrived with Jae-won in a car she did not recognize. One of his, she realized, a quiet black vehicle with no visible driver visible from the back seat, the interior so well soundproofed that the city disappeared when the door closed. They sat in comfortable silence for 4 minutes on the way to the gallery. Then he said, without looking at her, "Your investor called."
She turned.
"Which one?" "Park Sung-min," he said. "He called my office this morning." She stared. "How does Park Sung-min know to call your office?" "Because Park Sung-min and I have a history of mutually beneficial business arrangements," Jae-won said. "And because he made inquiries about you after the dinner, and someone in his network mentioned my name and yours together, and he called to ask me directly whether Obesai Beauty was worth his attention." "What did you tell him?" she asked. "The truth," he said. "That the brand has the strongest foundation in its category, and the woman running it is the most prepared person to walk into a Seoul investor meeting in the last 5 years." Chitty was quiet for a moment. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "That wasn't part of the arrangement," she said. "No," he said. "It wasn't." She looked at him in the dim car interior, the city lights passing across his face at intervals, the same face that rooms reorganized themselves around, and felt something she had been very specifically not feeling gain approximately 3 degrees of warmth. "Jae-won," she said. "Yes," he said. Is this still?" She stopped. "Reorganized. What is this?" He turned to look at her then. Fully. The way he looked at things he had decided to pay attention to. "I believe," he said, "that is the question." The car stopped. The gallery entrance appeared through the window. Somewhere inside it, Emeka was already there. She had known he would be, had arranged for him to be told about the event through a mutual friend who did not know they were fighting, which Chitty had considered borderline but ultimately necessary. "Ready," Jae-won said. She looked at the gallery entrance, then back at him. "Something happened," she said. "Between the dinner and now. Something shifted." "Yes," he said.
Simply.
Without pretending otherwise. "That's a problem," she said. "Potentially," he said. "We had an arrangement," she said.
"We did," he said.
"The arrangement was professional," she said. "It was," he said. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the same expression that rooms could not look away from, and that she was rapidly losing the ability to be objective about. "Tell me it hasn't shifted for you," she said. "Tell me you're still performing and I'll believe you and we'll walk into that gallery and finish the 2 weeks and part professionally, and that will be the end of it." He held her gaze for a long moment. He said nothing, which was, of course, everything. The gallery was the kind of space that existed in the specific overlap between art and ambition. High ceilings, raw concrete walls softened by the warm amber lighting, works by Nigerian and Korean artists hung side by side in a curatorial statement that Chitty found quietly moving, the conversation between aesthetics that she had been trying to have in business terms for months happening here in paint and textile and bronze. She walked through it with Jaewon and felt the familiar atmospheric shift of his presence. Conversations dimming slightly as he passed, eyes following without their owners being fully aware they were following, and underneath it something newer, something that belonged specifically to the two of them walking in proximity. A specific kind of awareness of another body that she had been professionally managing for 5 days and was finding increasingly expensive to maintain. Emeka found them at the third room. She saw him before he reached them. Across a crowd of Seoul's creative and business elite, his Lagos-tailored suit slightly overdressed for this particular room, his expression the calibrated neutrality of a man who has been recalculating something for 3 days and has not yet landed on the correct answer.
Chitty, he said. Warm.
The warmth of a man trying. Emeka, she said. I didn't know you were coming tonight. She had known. Claude mentioned it, he said. His eyes moved to Jaewon. Jaewon. Emeka, Jaewon said. Same register. Same flat recognition. The specific quality of a man acknowledging someone who registers to him as approximately as significant as furniture. Emeka looked between them once. Then he made a decision. Can I have a minute? He said to Chitty. Just a few minutes. She looked at Jaewon. I'll get drinks, Jaewon said. The ease of a man absolutely comfortable with the moment. He moved away into the gallery crowd with a specific unhurried certainty of a man who had never once moved through a space in a way that communicated anything other than complete ownership of it. Emeka watched him go. Then he looked back at Chitty. Who is he? Emeka said. Not angry. Genuinely asking. The tone of a man who has been sleeping badly and thinking too much and has arrived at a question he needs answered.
I told you, she said.
He's been helping with the distribution conversations. That's not what I'm asking, Emeka said. She looked at him. He looks at you, Emeka said. Quietly. The way he looks at you. Like you're the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. He paused. I've never looked at you like that. The admission landed between them. She felt it. He felt it landing. Emeka, she started.
No, he said.
Let me say it. He looked at his shoes briefly. Then back at her. The dinner. At Dal. What I said, the way I said it. I've been thinking about it every day since. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I've been wrong about a lot of things with you for a long time, and I've been telling myself it was honesty, and it wasn't. It was fear. I was afraid that you'd build the thing and not need me anymore, and it was easier to make you feel like the thing wasn't real than to admit that you were outgrowing the version of us that existed before Seoul. Chitty looked at him for a long time. There was a part of her, the part that had loved him for 2 years, the part that knew the good version of him, the version that showed up when she was sick and remembered her grandmother's birthday and knew exactly how she took her coffee. That part of her felt the admission landing somewhere real. But there was another part. The part that had stood at a bathroom sink in Dal trying to rebuild her composure after a table full of investors watched her boyfriend diminish her. The part that had spent 3 days formulating a plan because conversation had run out of road. The part that had sat across from a man in a private room and felt, for the first time in months, like she was being assessed rather than managed. I hear you, she said. I do. But, he said. But I think, she said carefully, that we've been having the wrong version of this conversation for a long time. And I think Seoul showed us something about where we are that we wouldn't have seen in Lagos. You're ending this, he said. I'm saying, she said, that I think we both already know what this is. Emeka was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly, the nod of a man processing something painful that he'd been on the edge of knowing for a while. Is it him? He asked. It's me, she said, because that was true. It was her. It was the version of herself she had been in Seoul. The version that walked into a private room and negotiated with the most dangerous man in the city, without her hands shaking, except once at the door, and only she had noticed. It was the version that had sat at the gallery dinner and felt specifically and completely seen for the first time in 2 years. Emeka looked across the gallery to where Jaewon was moving back through the crowd with 2 drinks, the amber light of the gallery finding him in the specific way that good lighting finds people whose faces have something worth illuminating. He's not what I expected, Emeka said. He's not what I expected either, Chitty said quietly. Emeka looked at her for one more moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He reached out and touched her face briefly, The way you touched something you're saying goodbye to and said, "Build the thing, Chitty. Build all of it." He walked away. She stood in the middle of the gallery with the sound of the crowd around her and the weight of 2 years settling into its correct shape, which was the shape of something that had run its course and been released cleanly, which was the best possible way for something to end. Then Jae-won was beside her. He said nothing for a moment, just handed her the drink.
"Are you all right?" he said.
"Yes," she said.
And she meant it.
"What happened?" he said. "We ended something," she said. "Properly. Without drama."
It was, she paused.
"It was okay, actually." He looked at her with the specific quality of his attention that she had stopped trying to be objective about. "Good," he said. Quietly. Just that. And the specific warmth inside it, the thing that was not relief exactly, but something adjacent to it, the quality of a man for whom her being all right was a thing he cared about outside the parameters of any arrangement, landed in her chest like something arriving home. She looked at him.
"Jae-won," she said.
"Yes," he said. "The arrangement ends in 9 days," she said. "I know," he said. "After that," she said, "there's no professional context for whatever this is." "I know," he said. "That's either a problem or a solution," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. The gallery moved around them. Somewhere behind them, a Nigerian artist was explaining a piece to a Korean collector, 2 worlds meeting in the middle of something beautiful, and Chitty thought that was probably the most accurate image of everything that was happening tonight. "I've spent 37 years, Jae-won said, knowing exactly what every room I entered was and exactly what my position in it was. I have never once been in a room and not known those 2 things with complete certainty." He looked at her. "Until 9 days ago." "9 days ago you walked into a private room and met me," she said. "Yes," he said. "And now you don't know what the room is," she said. "I know exactly what the room is," he said. "I just don't know what to do with that knowledge yet." She looked at him.
"Neither do I," she said.
And somehow that was the most honest thing either of them had said in 9 days, and it felt better than any of the managed, careful things. Before this story takes its next turn, drop a comment right now. Was Chitty right to end things with Emeka the way she did? And do you think Jae-won had already fallen before this gallery night? Or was this the moment it happened? Tell me your city, and tell me what you think, because I need to know before everything changes in the next part. The next morning arrived cold and clear, and full of a complication nobody had planned for. Chitty was in her apartment at 7 in the morning with a mug of tea and her projections open on her laptop when the notification came through. Not from Park Sung-min's office, as she had been hoping, but from a Korean news aggregator she had set up to flag any mentions of Obesai beauty in the Korean press. The headline read, "Nigerian beauty executive linked to Kong organization." She put down her tea. The article was brief and carefully worded in the specific way of Korean gossip journalism that knows how to say something damaging without technically saying it. 3 paragraphs connecting her name to Jae-won's through the gallery appearance and the dinner. Noting that the Kong organization's involvement in the legitimate hospitality sector was well documented, and raising the implicit question of what a Nigerian luxury brand executive doing business in Seoul was doing in that orbit. It was not damaging in the criminal sense. It was damaging in the investor sense, which was worse. She called Jae-won. He picked up on the first ring.
"I've seen it," he said.
"What does this do to Park Sung-min?" she said. "Park Sung-min has been in business in Seoul for 30 years, Jae-won said. He has seen worse and worked with worse, and he is not a man who makes decisions based on gossip journalism. But he will want to understand the nature of our connection before he commits." "Our connection," she said. "Which is a professional arrangement." A pause. Brief.
"Yes," he said.
"Which is a professional arrangement." The pause had lasted half a second. She had heard everything in it. "I'm coming over," he said. "You don't need to," she started. "I'm coming over," he said. Not a request. He arrived 40 minutes later in a dark jacket and no tie, which was the least formally she had seen him, and which did something specific to the atmosphere of her apartment that she was going to have to address at some point and not yet. She had laid out the article on her laptop on the kitchen island. He read it standing. She watched his expression move through several things in quick succession, most of them internal and most of them manageable, except for one which she caught briefly at the end of his read, A specific kind of controlled fury that she understood was not directed at her or at the situation, but at the universe's timing, which she appreciated. This came from Emika's network, he said. She looked up. What? One of the mutual contacts from the dinner, he said. Someone who recognized me and has a relationship with a media contact. He set the laptop down. It was not malicious. It was gossip. But the source is traceable. Emika wouldn't, she started. Not Emika directly, he said. One of his associates. The man who was sitting at the end of the table on Thursday. He has a history of this kind of social currency exchange.
She absorbed this.
Can it be managed? Already being managed, he said. I made 2 calls on the way here. The article will be taken down within the hour. The distribution of it will be contained. He looked at her. But Park Sung-min will have seen it. Then I need to call Park Sung-min, she said. Let me call him, Jae-won said. No, she said. Immediately. Firmly. This is my business and my investor relationship and my call. What you can do is tell me what I need to know about how Park Sung-min thinks, so I can have the right conversation. Jae-won looked at her for a moment. Then something shifted in his expression, not concession exactly, more like recognition. The expression of a man who has spent 37 years being the most capable person in every room and has just encountered, in this specific kitchen at 7:45 in the morning, someone who does not need him to fix things. Just to be there while she fixes them herself. Park Sung-min values directness above everything, he said. He respects people who name the thing in the room rather than navigate around it. Don't explain the connection away. Name it as what it is, and explain why it doesn't affect his investment thesis. And what is it? She said. The connection. In the version I tell Park Sung-min. Jae-won held her gaze. A personal relationship, he said. That is all he needs to know. That it is personal and not organizational, and therefore has no bearing on Obesai Beauty's operational independence. A personal relationship, she said. Yes, he said. His voice was completely even. His eyes were not. She picked up her phone. She called Park Sung-min. The call lasted 14 minutes. She named the connection directly. Personal relationship with Jae-won. No organizational involvement. Complete operational independence for Obesai Beauty. Her track record in the UK market available for his review. Her projections available for his audit at any time. She spoke with the specific confidence of a woman who has nothing to hide because she has done nothing wrong and knows the difference between perception and fact. Park Sung-min listened. He asked 3 questions. She answered all 3 directly. At the end of the call he said, I'll have my office send the term sheet by Friday. She put the phone down on the kitchen island. Jae-won was watching her from across the counter. Friday, she said. I heard, he said. She looked at him. He looked back at her. The morning light was coming through the apartment windows and landing on his face, and she was very tired of pretending she didn't notice things about his face. The arrangement, she said. Yes, he said. It ends in 6 days, she said. Yes, he said. The article, she said. Park Sung-min. What just happened in the last 40 minutes? None of that was in the arrangement. No, he said. It wasn't. You came over, she said. At 7:45 in the morning. Not because the arrangement required it. He said nothing. Jae-won, she said. I need you to tell me something true. Ask, he said. She looked at him across the kitchen island. The distance between them a geography she was becoming increasingly aware of and increasingly tired of. When did it stop being an arrangement for you? She said. He held her gaze for a long moment. The car, he said. On the way to the gallery. When you said something shifted and I couldn't tell you it hadn't. She had known. She had known in the car. She had asked because sometimes you need to hear the answer even when you already know it. I'm not a simple person, she said. I work too much and I think too much and I have very specific opinions about almost everything and I am building something in this city that requires everything I have and is not going to slow down because of anything personal. I know, he said. You run a criminal organization, she said. A legacy organization with significant legitimate holdings, he said. That is technically accurate, Jae-won. I know what I run, he said. Without defense. Just acknowledgement. That is complicated, she said. Yes, he said. I need time to think about complicated, she said. I know, he said. Take it. She looked at him. You're being very reasonable about this. I am not a reasonable man, he said. But I understand what you are and what you're building, and I would rather wait for you to think clearly than have you arrive somewhere before you're ready. She stared at him. Did you just say you'd wait? Yes, he said. Simply. You're Kong Jae-won, she said. Yes, he said. You don't wait for things, she said. You acquire them, or you remove the obstacle, or you restructure the situation. The ghost of amusement. Generally. And for me you'd wait, she said. For you, he said, I would restructure my entire understanding of waiting if that's what's required. She looked at him for a very long time. Then she walked around the kitchen island. She stopped in front of him, close enough that the specific warmth she had been aware of since the first night was immediately present and no longer professionally managed. She looked up at him. You fell first, she said. He looked down at her. Yes, he said, without shame, without pretense. The most unguarded single word she had heard from him in 12 days. She reached up and touched his jaw, just once, just briefly, just enough to confirm that the reality of him matched the weight of the last 12 days. Then she stepped back.
6 days, she said.
Give me 6 days to finish the arrangement properly and get the term sheet from Park Sung-min and think about what complicated looks like. 6 days, he said. And then we have a conversation, she said. Yes, he said. She turned back to her laptop. J1, she said. Yes, he said.
Thank you, she said.
For the calls. For Park Sung-min. For this morning. You didn't need me, he said.
No, she said.
But I was glad you were here. He left 10 minutes later. She sat alone in her apartment with her projections and her term sheet coming on Friday and 6 days left on an arrangement that had stopped being an arrangement somewhere around day 9 and felt, for the first time in longer than she could accurately measure, like every part of her was pointing in the same direction. The twist arrived on day 5. Not the twist Chitty had been managing in her mind. The emotional one, the complicated one, the one that lived in the space between an arrangement and something real. A different twist. The kind that comes from outside rather than inside, that has nothing to do with feelings and everything to do with the world those feelings are trying to exist in. His name was Kong Dae-sung, Jae-won's older cousin. 12 years in the organizational hierarchy. The specific kind of man who had spent those 12 years believing he understood the Kong organization better than the man running it and waiting for the right leverage to prove it. The leverage arrived in the form of a photograph, taken at the gallery opening. Jae-won and Chitty at close range, the specific quality of two people in conversation who are not aware of being watched, the body language between them telling a story that the organization's bylaws had very specific things to say about, the bylaws that stated, in language written by Jae-won's father before he died, that the head of the Kong organization could not enter into a personal relationship with any foreign national without council approval, a clause written in a specific political moment that had never been invoked because no head of the organization had ever given anyone reason to invoke it. Until now. Jae-won told her on day 5. He arrived at her apartment in the evening, different from the morning visit, different in the specific way of a man carrying something he is not entirely sure how to deliver. She knew immediately. She had learned to read the quality of his stillness, and this was a different quality. Not the controlled stillness of a man who has decided to wait, but the specific stillness of a man who has been handed a problem that he cannot simply acquire or remove or restructure. Tell me, she said. He told her. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. The council, she said. They convene in 3 days, he said. And they'll require you to end it, she said. The personal relationship. They'll require me to submit it for approval, he said. Which is procedurally different from ending it. But effectively, she said. The approval process takes 6 months, he said, during which any ongoing contact is considered a violation of organizational protocol. 6 months. She looked at him. Is there another way? There are several other ways, he said. None of them are options I'm willing to use. Tell me, she said. He held her gaze. The clause was written by my father. It can be removed by a council vote. A council vote requires 7 of 9 members. I have 4 who would vote with me immediately. A 5th who is persuadable but cautious. The remaining 4 are aligned with Daesung. So you're 2 votes short, she said.
Yes, he said.
And 6 months apart, she said. From the council's position, yes, he said. From your position, she said. He looked at her steadily. From my position, I have spent 37 years honoring obligations to an organization my father built and running it with everything I have and making decisions I believed in, and there have been approximately 3 things in my life that I have wanted for reasons that had nothing to do with strategy.
He paused.
You are the first one that involves another person. She absorbed that. 6 months, she said again, testing the weight of it. If the vote fails, he said. If it passes, the clause is removed and there is no restriction. And if it fails and you continue anyway, she said, then Daesung has grounds to challenge my leadership position, he said. Which is what this is actually about. The clause is the instrument. The challenge is the point. She stood up from the sofa and walked to the window. Seoul glittered below her apartment the way it had the first night she arrived. The night she stood here with a plan and a 5-year strategy and no idea that a wrong door was coming. She thought about 6 months. She thought about what she was building. She thought about Park Sung-min's term sheet, which had arrived on Friday exactly as promised, which had made her stand in the middle of her apartment and feel the specific joy of a woman watching something she built with everything she had become real in front of her. She thought about a man who said he would wait. She turned around. The 5th council member, she said. The persuadable one. Yes, he said, watchful. What would persuade them, she said. Jae-won looked at her for a moment. Why? Because you said 6 months from the council's position, she said. Not from yours. And not from mine. She held his gaze. Tell me what persuades the 5th vote. He stared at her. Chitty, he said. This is my complication too, she said. You don't get to carry it alone just because it comes from your world. Tell me what persuades the 5th vote. A long pause. Lee Jun-ho, he said. 61. 3 decades in the organization. Not aligned with Daesung, but not a reformer by nature. He votes on precedent and on what he believes is good for the organization's long-term stability. He paused. He has a daughter who graduated from LSE last year with a business degree. He has been trying for 8 months to find her a position in the Korean luxury market. He has not been able to because the right introductions have not been available. Chitty looked at him. I know Park Sung-min, she said. I know you do, he said. And Park Sung-min's distribution network connects to 6 luxury conglomerates who have graduate entry programs, she said. Yes, he said. That's not a favor, she said. That's a legitimate opportunity for a qualified candidate through a legitimate channel. Yes, he said. It is. She looked at him steadily. I'm not compromising anything. I know, he said. That's why I'm not suggesting it. You're reaching the conclusion independently. I'm reaching the conclusion independently, she confirmed. And I'll make the introduction independently. Through my own network. Because it's a legitimate opportunity. She held his gaze. And if Lee Jun-ho happens to feel warmly disposed toward the removal of an outdated organizational clause after that, that's a separate matter. Something moved across Jae-won's face that was the most unguarded thing she had seen on it yet. Not the ghost of amusement, not the warmth she had been cataloging since the dinner, but something deeper. The expression of a man who has been shown, in a single conversation, that the person across from him will not need to be carried through a complicated life. She will walk through it herself, thank you, and occasionally she will hold your hand while she does it, which is an entirely different thing.
Chitty, he said.
Yes, she said. I have a question, he said. Ask it, she said. After the council, he said. After Park Sung-min's term sheet and the brand launch and 6 months or however long it takes to untangle the organizational piece, after all of that. He looked at her steadily. What do you actually want? She looked at him for a long time. Then she walked toward him, stopped close, looked up at him. I want to build something extraordinary, she said. In this city. For my grandmother and my mother, and for every woman who ever looked at what we made and felt something real. She held his gaze. And I want to stop pretending that walking into a private room 9 days ago and shaking the hand of the most dangerous man in Seoul wasn't the beginning of something that I was not remotely prepared for and have no intention of walking away from. His hand found her face. Careful.
Certain.
That's two things, he said. I'm good at multiple objectives, she said. He laughed. The actual laugh, not the ghost of amusement, the real thing, full and unguarded and taking up space in her apartment in a way that made the room feel entirely different. The laugh of a man who has spent 37 years never being surprised by anything, discovering that he has been completely and happily wrong. He kissed her then. Not staged, not arranged, not a performance for a table of investors or a room of gallery guests. Just the two of them in her apartment with Seoul outside the window and 6 months of council procedure ahead of them and a term sheet on the counter and 3 generations of Nigerian excellence waiting to make the Korean beauty market understand what it had been missing. She kissed him back with the specific conviction of a woman who makes decisions fully and without apology. The council met 7 days later. Lee Jun-ho voted with Jae-won. The clause was removed 5 votes to 4. Dae-sung left the meeting with nothing except the knowledge that he had miscalculated the specific kind. Met 7 days later. Lee Jun-ho voted with Jae-won. The clause was removed 5 votes to 4 of woman Kang Jae-won had found in a wrong door moment in Seoul, which was the kind of woman who does not require protecting, only witnessing. Park Sung-min's distribution agreement was signed 6 weeks later. Obesai Beauty launched in the Korean market on a Thursday in March, the same day of the week Chitty's grandmother had first sold her rosewood oil at a market in Enugu in 1971, which was not planned but felt correct. Jae-won was at the launch. Not prominently. Not in a way that made the business story about anything other than the business. Just present in the way he had been present since a cold night in a private room. Steady, attentive, finding everything she did worth his time. Emika sent flowers. White ones. She appreciated the gesture and the grace of it. Her grandmother's photograph was at the booth. 3 generations. All of it pointing in the same direction. Some arrangements become something real before either person is ready to name what they are becoming. The ones that survive that transition are the ones where both people, at the specific moment when naming becomes necessary, choose honesty over comfort. Chitty Obesai walked into a room looking for leverage and found instead someone who looked at her work the way her grandmother's formula deserved to be looked at, as something inevitable, as something that was always going to arrive here regardless of what stood between it and its destination. Kang Jae-won agreed to be hired and discovered somewhere in the second week that he was no longer capable of performing the one thing he had been paid to perform. He had spent 37 years being afraid of very little. He was completely and thoroughly afraid of losing this. So tell me, do you think Chitty made the right call in using her network to help with the council situation, or did she compromise something she shouldn't have? And do you think Jae-won fell because of who Chitty was, or because of what she showed him about who he could be? And if you were in Chitty's position, a wrong door, the most dangerous man in Seoul, an arrangement that stopped being an arrangement, would you have walked back through that door? If this story moved you, subscribe to Afro Seoul Connect and never miss the next one. Drop a like, leave your city in the comments, and send this to someone who needs a great love story today. We will see you in the next episode.